Dan, do you carry your vaccination card? Because I do, and I'm ready to show proof that I have been vaccinated so we can move into phase 5. I'm Dionne Miller from ABC7. He's Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune, joining you to talk more about Bears OTAs and I guess the lack of attendance at this point as to where these guys are at. What are your thoughts on this?
First of all, you threw me a question that I have to answer. I do not carry my vaccination card on me. I did fly to North Carolina last weekend, and I brought it because I didn't know if there was going to be any questions on an airplane, in an airport, anywhere it was. So I don't usually carry it. I did in that case. 5 is my favorite number. 5 was my basketball number for most of my career. I like phase 5. Let's roll into phase 5. Now, as for the more important question about Bears OTAs, I've got multiple thoughts on this attendance thing because I'm bothered by the defensive attendance through the first 2 weeks of OTAs, and I'm bothered for very legitimate reasons that go beyond the work that can get done in an 80-minute on-the-grass practice at Halas Hall in June. I'm also impressed by the offensive attendance and the determination of that group, really across all of the positions, to squeeze the most out of these OTAs as they can. But let's start with the defense, because you name me any key offensive or defensive player, and they haven't been at Halas Hall, save for Roquan Smith, who, by the way, is coming off his best season and was probably the Bears' best defensive player a year ago, and sees the value in showing up to try to get better in these OTA periods. Where's Khalil Mack? Where's Robert Quinn? Where's Danny Trevathan? Where's Eddie Jackson? Where's Jalen Johnson? Where's Eddie Goldman? Where's Angelo Blackson? Where's Jeremiah Attacher? I could keep going down the list. I guess my holdup on this, Dionne, is 2 things. Number one, I'm worried that this defense is still living in 2018 when they were one, if not the best defense in the NFL. We've talked about the numbers forever. Sacks, takeaways, touchdowns, all the points allowed, all the things they did so well to sell a division championship in 2018. They haven't been that defense the last 2 years. And so if they think that they're still that defense and that gives them sort of this comfort skipping on-field work with a new coordinator in Sean Desai at a time when it would be helpful to get ramped up toward training camp, then I'm worried about that. And I think it's something they have to answer to. My second question on this is I just don't understand the resistance. Matt Nagy already wiped away week 1 of OTAs, a few weeks ago. 3 practices off the books. Okay, little olive branch to the players. If we get rid of these, will you show up to the other ones? Defensive players said, no, we won't show up. And I don't get what the holdup is. I know the Players Union has encouraged players to push back against the addition of the 17th game, and they feel like this is their way to push back. I just don't understand how difficult it is to show up 3 days in June when you haven't really done any on-field work with your team since the end of last season.
I don't understand it either. And I guess the thing that is really interesting to me is that in years past, when one guy wasn't there, it was a headline. And now the headline is, well, these are voluntary. Yeah. Like, wait a minute, you can't change your tune and say that now that it is. I refuse to believe that a new defensive coordinator in Sean Desai, though he knows these guys, is okay with this. I just refuse to believe that. That has to bother him that they're not there right now for these. Yes, I get it. It's 80 minutes of your life and it's sweaty and it's hot. You're not in pads and all the things. But if you're trying to build some sort of chemistry team-wide, doesn't that start now? Especially when you've got 2 new quarterbacks coming in. No matter what side of the ball you fall on, you would think the energy and excitement would be there that would make you say, I'm so committed. I'm here now. I'm going to come now.
It's chemistry building. It's tone setting. It's recognizing that the last 2 years you went 8-8 and crushed the hopes of Chicago, right? Recognize that. Have the self-awareness to say those last 2 years were brutal. And we are going to do everything we can to make sure that those types of things don't happen again. To your point about setting a tone, listen, we hear all the time about that defense being the group that just, set a tempo, set a tone, the work ethic of Akeem Hicks, the way that Khalil Mack practices, the leadership vocally of Eddie Jackson. Those things are missing from these OTAs. Okay, so what does it mean? A lot of people will say, well, what does Akeem Hicks or Khalil Mack or even Eddie Jackson need out of OTAs? Okay, maybe they don't need it for themselves, but listen, Travis Gapson is a young pass rusher. Probably could benefit occasionally from picking the brain of Khalil Mack. They've got a rookie in Tevin Jenkins who's going to be asked to play left tackle at some point. It might be nice to cross paths with Khalil at some point on the practice field or elsewhere around the facility and say, hey, can I just pick your brain on a pass rush move? We're talking about Justin Fields. When's Justin Fields going to be ready? Well, part of Justin Fields being ready is seeing a real live NFL defense with real live Pro Bowl caliber playmakers on it. And while we talked in our last video about Justin Fields throwing a 60-yard touchdown strike against Deontay Ruffin at defensive back, it may be a little bit more difficult if it's Jalen Johnson with Eddie Jackson over the top. And maybe that pass gets picked off and Justin Fields goes, oh, man, I can't throw that pass.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of things that factor into the entirety of this picture. I don't think it makes or breaks their Super Bowl chances for 2021 or beyond. No. But I think it's all about who you are, what your standard is, what you're willing to accept, and how hard you're willing to push to not accept mediocrity and pursue excellence. And so for me, that's where I get tied up in this.
Yes, I totally agree with you on that. And I go back to not just, so they might not benefit from that. And they might all be on board with Desai, but you still have to figure out, he has to figure out how he's going to coordinate these guys. Like what he's in a new role. To me, that in and of itself is value enough to show up for these things and kind of build that moment with him too, because he's in a different role. So what does that look like? How does he lead them differently? How than Pagano than he did when he was just an assistant coach? Like, how is it different now? And I think that is where the value lies too. And more than they're veterans, they don't need it. They don't want to do it. I get it.
There's a lot of things I don't want to do at work, right?
Right. And I do that, but you're also paid bajillions of dollars.
I'm not.
Legitimate, not you, Dan. Well, not yet. But bajillions of dollars to essentially work like late July until, if you're lucky, early February. So come to OTAs. Like, I get it. It was optional before, but it was always optional. Now it's just like, well, whatever. It's voluntary. Now, I will say that maybe some of them believe that going through the pandemic last year and kind of emerging from that and seeing that there was some value in whatever they did virtually that they can pick up or they can push forward and not show up for these things. I tend to disagree with that. I just feel like when your head coach is standing there talking about the value of these reps right now and you're not there, I can't figure that out.
I could also tell you that there were folks within the building that came out of the 2020 season saying that guys like Robert Quinn and Danny Trevathan really traditionally have benefited from the structure and rhythm of the offseason program to get themselves ready to play.
Yes.
Both of those guys had disappointing seasons in 2020. And so you would think if that's the internal review of why those disappointing seasons partially occurred, that you would want to be intent on getting on the same page on that and showing up and doing it. They're not on the same page. Roquan Smith seems to be breaking ranks. Again, the best player defensively in 2020 is here and busting his tail at the OTA practice. I'm very curious to ask him, if we're ever allowed to talk to him again, why did you see the value in this? And why didn't you go along with the rest of the group in that regard? Matt Nagy praised Roquan Smith a week ago for being here, right? So I will say this, Dionne, though, because I think it is fair to separate the defense and the offense. And I think the offense has showed up with an intent on squeezing the most out of these practices. And it's been impressive to hear from guys on the offensive line. Sam Mustipher talked to us this week about the value of building that cohesion up front and how they really want to make sure that they roll into training camp feeling more comfortable with one another, seeing things through a set of eyes. Darnell Mooney's inner drive, obviously something that the coaching staff is in love with. And he continues to show that, hey, look, I want to be the player that you think I can become. Let's work on this every day. You see that with Justin Fields and Andy Dalton and the work they're putting in. David Montgomery last week, I thought, was as impressive in an interview in the offseason as I've heard in a long time. He talked about there is no such thing as a half-assed leader, right? You show your teammates every single day that you're in this for the pursuit of excellence and that you're in it for them as well. I thought it was an amazing message for David Montgomery to throw out there. And whether he meant it as a shot at the defense, I don't think he did. It certainly resonated to me as boy, this is certainly a different approach. And I kudos David Montgomery for having that approach. He seems like a guy that in year 3 is determined to be a Pro Bowl level back. And it's cool to observe that and to feel that energy, right? Like, I'm a big believer in energy. And when you got guys like that with that kind of energy, it gets you going.
And for him to openly admit, like, I can give more than I did, and I can be a better leader than I was. And then to come out with a line like that, you see his growth and maturity, and that's what they desperately need. And it's just interesting to me. And the other thing is that is about how vaccinated they all will be and how that will go. I don't want to get too much into it because it is a personal thing. However,
look out, the comment section is already exploding.
I know. However, I mean, Nagy said we're encouraging guys to do it. The education is right there. Your team doctors are right there to tell you if it's safe or not for you. And the other thing that I'm curious about.
The league has recommended it. The players union has recommended it. Roger Goodell had the quote a couple weeks ago saying that no credible medical expert who's respected in any way, shape, or form has indicated that these are not effective, nor are they not safe. Right. So tell me where you're getting your information from. And I was trying to probe on that with some players yesterday. This is league wide, this hesitancy to get 2 shots in the arm and get back to normal. And I don't understand it. It seems to me to be a byproduct of sort of a polluted information pipeline. And the fact that a lot of people live their lives on social media now and are unable to discern between, credible expertise and sort of the unsubstantiated nonsense that gets us into these pickles. But look, we could roll into training camp and they could say we have 35% of our team vaccinated and we still have to be under COVID restrictions.
Yeah, that's very true. Although Nagy said he doesn't anticipate, didn't he say that he anticipates all of his staff will be vaccinated by then?
Staff, yeah.
So that is good. And he even said, I'm over the Zoom meetings. Aren't they too? Aren't they over it? And I was disappointed last weekend to see that the NFL is saying they're going to remain under these restrictions for I do think that's going to change because baseball's already changing. And I feel like they're going to get to a point where they can't do that. They can't keep media and writers away anymore. I think that league wide, they're going to have to open those doors up and figure something out there. I really do. I mean, I'm hopeful anyway, because that's therein lies the excitement for us, is to be able to bring fans and viewers closer than they ever could be. I mean, that's what our jobs, that's what makes our job so exciting. So hopefully that is on its way.
One more footnote on this. Washington football team coach Ron Rivera, former Bears coach, brought in a esteemed immunologist to speak to his team and give them information on the vaccines, to answer questions on the vaccine. And you had at least one player, Montez Sweat, say that he was not a fan of his coach bringing in an expert to educate the team on the vaccine. And you just stop and you face palm yourself and you go, oh my God, how have we gotten to a point where we won't even, your coach is trying to lead you down a path to educate you and inform you and allow you to make your decision with tangible facts. And you're saying, I'm not a fan of this. I don't want to be educated. I want to go on my social media or read whatever Facebook articles I find, and I'm going to make my decision that way. And maybe there'll be a key stuck to my head. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole on this.
Come back, video. Dan, come back.
This is not the forum for that. You got me started. We should just go back to phase 5 because 5 is a good number. Phase 5.
Phase 5. High five. Like, subscribe, share. We appreciate it.